You're listening to In Sickness, a podcast about caregiving with Allison Breininger and Justin Bima.
Good morning, Allison.
Hi, Justin. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. It's been a busy month.
Okay.
And so just, I don't know, a lot of activity this month. And so I'm kind of a little worn down, but
Yeah.
still moving forward.
Good activity, hard activity, just generic
busy.
activity. Busy.
Yeah. It just feels like every week there's a lot of things. And it's just, I don't like my calendar being that packed.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes they're good things, just when there's so many.
Yes.
So much going on, there's not time to kind of rest and just be and
Yeah. I hear that.
So hoping October will be a more relaxing month.
Yes. I hope so too.
Yeah.
I feel like with September, like it's a funny thing. Like I can never remember like the number for September. You know, like 9.
It's
and
9,
I think you're right. But I think it's because September is always such a blur, you know, and I spent so many of my years of my life, like either in the school system or working for the school system. And so like, I feel like September just like doesn't even exist. You know, it's just like so much that it's just like, what just happened? So yeah, I think there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
How are things going for you this week or lately?
Well, I think about the expletive I used last time, and I apologize for that. If that was hard for anyone's sensitive ears. It's worse than that one, but I won't use a worse expletive. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah. So Sean on Thursday went in. A great thing is that they're trying to figure out this G-tube situation. And at first they were like, we need to do this procedure. We'll get you in like 6 weeks.
Oh.
So speaking of like advocacy and Enneagram, this is kind of a good combination of that Sean and I were both on speakerphone with this nurse, and Sean's like, okay. I mean, it's okay. Sure, Sean, sweet. Enneagram 9, peacemaker Sean. It's okay. And I said, no, it's not. I said, look, this is impacting his daily life. He's in constant pain. He can't eat very much. He can't drink very much. And he like can't do much without being in pain.
Yeah.
So we can't wait that long. And she was like, okay, we'll do what we can. You know, and again, it's like if we had just gone with Sweet Sean, or if I hadn't said that, you know, and also sometimes, I mean, the systems only can do what it can do.
Right.
But like a day later, they called and said, we can get you in this week.
That's great.
Which we were like, yes, thank you. So we were just expecting like not a huge deal. Like he said, so it was going to be an endoscopy where they're going to go in. They were going to look around, which they've done a bunch of times because people with Fanconi anemia have a high incidence of esophageal cancer.
Okay.
So look around for that. And then while they're in there, go through and add a little clip that they call a bear clip to the back side of where this hole was from his G-tube to try to clamp it off.
Okay.
And he's had, not the clip part, but the other part, like a bunch of times. So first of all, like just like going to the hospital. I mean, I could talk for days just about that part, right? Being at the hospital, this hospital that I've been in a million times, just like the, repeat trauma of that, of being in this building. I was trying to my brain just kept saying, I hate it here. I hate it here. But I was trying to remind myself that like, this is also the place that is a place of healing, but also I hate it here,
Yeah.
So anyway, the surgery itself went as well as it could. They did biopsy 4 different spots, but they're not too concerned about them. Still waiting for results on that. But he woke up usually he wakes up from anesthesia. He's like hilarious. He's like singing. It's like a great time for everyone involved. Yeah. And like he and the nurse become best friends. And on the way home, he's like, I want to get McDonald's. Like that's the way this usually goes.
Okay.
But I went back there and he was like in rough shape and like in so much pain and like immediate, like full of like so much congestion. It's very bizarre. And they're like, well, he has a cold, right? And I was like, no, he did not have a cold when I left him. What did you do to him? Right. So much pain and so much gunk, could not speak. And they do say like every time you get like intubated, like you might have a sore throat, but like this was like beyond. And I keep trying to explain to them like, this is a guy who has like the highest pain tolerance and who has been through everything. So if he says it hurts. So again, they were like, what's your pain number? And he was like 7. I was like, okay, that's like a 43.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was Thursday. Today is Sunday, and he continues to be in excruciating pain. They sent him home because there wasn't much they could do. They gave him pain meds, but he still can hardly swallow.
Oh,
He like the gunk is just like intense, and so he's like coughing, but then that hurts.
Oh,
so we've had to call in and get like bigger pain meds. As of this morning, we just started him on some steroids because they said, okay, if it's not better by this time, to try that and see if that helps. It's just been awful. And especially because I think we didn't expect it.
Right.
Like usually he just is like, oh yeah, I had this procedure and it was rough, but like, I feel okay,
Yeah.
And so he keeps saying, I didn't expect this to happen. And I'm like, I know I didn't either, and so they say it's probably just that the clip like scratched his throat all the way down. But still, like, so it's been terrible, and it does not feel like the end is in sight.
Oh,
and we're on day 4. So that has been an unexpectedly awful last few days. It has felt very like acute, like acute caregiving of like, I've got the dresser top full of medicines and the keeping track of like what hour did he have this and what pain number, and I'm checking the thermometer and checking his oxygen, just feeling very like acute at this moment. So I'm a little bleary this morning.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah,
but I'm also happy to be here because this is also cathartic for me to be with you and to talk about these things. So ironically, we had picked this topic, or I had thought of this topic before
all this happened.
This latest thing. But at the latest support groups, a topic that kind of came up was how hard it is to watch our person suffer.
Yes.
And that is a huge part of caregiving, is just having to be like a witness to that. And for those of us who are chronic illness caregivers, like that is like a long-term witnessing, right? Not just like car accident, witnessing something, moving on, like it's a long-term. So already I had sort of had this topic in the back of my head, and now that's what I've basically done for the last 4 days, is like witness my person suffer. So shall we talk about it?
Let's talk about it.
She says as she guzzles her coffee.
Right.
So anyway, why don't you start off? What are your thoughts on that, or what has been your experience in sort of having to be a witness to your favorite person in the world in pain and suffering?
Yeah, certainly it is something that I have experienced. Thankfully, it is less so now. But I mean, those years where Sarah was in bed, I mean, there would be times where she was in extreme pain, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, we had some things we could do to try to like mitigate that, but it didn't feel like we had a ton of tools, but we would do the things we had, and it didn't always make a difference. And so it's just like you're stuck in that spot and you feel so helpless. Yeah. I think that's an overwhelming sensation of it, is that I think as caregivers, we so much want to be doing, be fixing, be like, or have at least something that we can do.
Right.
Like be active in this. And that you get stuck to this point where there is nothing more you can do.
Yeah.
And you're just there with them, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
And I remember like the one thing that you can do, and you kind of used this phrase already, but like bearing witness to their suffering.
Yeah.
And like that is something you can do, because that I think is validating for them to know that what they're going through is seen and like seen for the magnitude that it is.
Yeah.
And it's not, and I think just being with them so that they are not alone in those moments too. I think that doesn't always feel like we're doing anything, but I think our presence in those times can be helpful too. But yeah, the overwhelming helplessness is what I remember, is just like, it's just horrible.
Yeah. When you said, one of the first words you said was years, you're like, I remember the years that Sarah, the years. So I think that's a thing for those of us who are like chronic illness caregivers, right? Or even people who are beginning, but like it's one thing if your person like breaks their leg and you're watching this thing and it's really hard to watch. You know, like there's somebody I just met who was like, my husband broke his leg and I was his caregiver for 3 months and it was hard and terrible. And she's like, I cannot imagine 13 years. Right. So I think that that's another piece of it is like the law, like it's hard either way.
Right.
And for those of us in the chronic illness world, like it is to know that like this isn't short term. This isn't going away. This isn't the last, even if it's ebbs and flows, this isn't the last time I'm going to be witnessing something like this. And I think something I'm experiencing now is like being in this moment now is also like having these like little flashbacks to previous moments, right?
Yeah.
Even like the sights and some smells and some sounds of like, this is like that time that he had that. This, that the bottles on the dresser are reminding me of that surgery, you know, like, and so like the repeat trauma for us as the witnesses of seeing the thing and of knowing that like, this is not the last time that we're going to see the thing. It's not just like, okay, let's get through this really hard 3 weeks. And then you're like, we'll be healed and then we'll move on. It's like, oh my gosh, like this is our life.
Yeah.
And this will continue to happen. You know, like that is like,
yeah. Right. Yeah. And I think there's like with, you know, watching our people suffer, I think there's very much a focus on them and how they're feeling and their pain and all of that. And that's like, yes, we need like, that's a huge thing. But I think we lose sight of the compounding impact that being present for all of that has on us. Like, I think just witnessing that for years is just, I mean, the compounding trauma of that just, I think, and I don't know what the like fix is the wrong word, but like, I think there's things that probably you can do to like help release that or something so that it doesn't just build up. Because I think then like our bodies are all connected and like, I imagine, you know, physically you can start feeling different. Like it's just, there's so much you're holding.
Right.
That it, I think is overwhelming.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think even like the seeing, you know, just like the visual of like, you know, nobody else sees our people like this. So I think it's almost like the, I don't know if loneliness is the right word, but like, you know, nobody else, even when like yesterday, so Sean's dad is in town.
Yeah.
And so yesterday he came over and Sean like got out of bed, you know, for the first time in a couple of days and had like 10 minutes with his dad. And then, but even for that, like Sean totally rallied. Right. For that time. And so it's like we, the spouses or the sort of primary frontline person, see them at their very worst.
Yes. Yeah.
And they're most vulnerable and they're, you know, and more so than anyone else. So it's also this piece of like, nobody else can even begin to understand. Yeah. You know, because even if like Sean's dad is like, oh, I saw Sean and I saw him and he was looking pretty rough, I would just kind of want to be like, yeah, that was him like really putting on a show.
Yeah.
For those 15 minutes. Like you didn't see like what the impact of that 15 minutes did.
Right.
And then how much pain and how terrible he felt after that.
Yeah.
You know, so there's also this sort of singularity of it that it's like, it's not even, I mean, it's different maybe if they're in the hospital and then there's like a team of doctors and whatever, right? But like, I think in so many of these, like in yours, so much of what happened was in your home.
Yeah.
In your bedroom. And like, and for us as well. And so like the being the person, the single person who is witnessing these things alone and bearing, it feels like a really heavy weight, you know?
I hadn't thought about that part of it with the loneliness of it because you're right. It is just you in a lot of these cases and you're experiencing them at their worst. And in those moments, there's no one else around to be supporting you. It feels like you were just there in it. And that feeling lonely through that for sure. I remember that.
Yeah. And so even like when you were saying earlier, like it's important that we sit in that room and we bear witness and we're there with them. But also we're talking about like how hard that is.
Right.
Right. And so it's like trying to find the balance between like, do we just like sit and stare at them? Like, even if that's really hard for us, do we sit in that room, even though we don't, maybe need to sleep 23 hours a day, like maybe they do at this time. But then like, so at this moment, like this whole last few days, like I, like help him and then I leave the room and then I'm like, well, now what do I do?
Right.
Like, do I, Sean's dad's in town. So there are all these like activities. I'm like, do I go leave the house like that? I don't think so.
Right.
But also like I feel like garbage from what I've been going through,
Yeah.
But then it feels weird to be like in the other room, like watching TV and eating takeout when he's in this other room feeling awful, but I'm like, do I, you know what I mean? It just feels like this, like we're impacted, but we're not the person. And so how do we like coexist in that space and time when our person is like feeling so awful, but like we aren't feeling awful, but we're feeling sort of awful. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, there's a real tension there.
There is. Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to do, but I think you're right that there are times like you need to step away. Because maybe, there are things that need to get done. And that's part like, to keep things moving, to keep things going around the house. I don't know. There's things like that. And also we need to take care of ourselves so that we can continue to be there with them at their worst in these times. And I think it's really hard to take that step away and, I don't know, recover or do something that can restore us without feeling really guilty in these times. I think when they're not doing well, when they're at their worst with all of this pain, like it does feel like anything else that you're doing, like, no, I should be there. I should be there with them. Everything else, pulling away from that feels the guilt is really there. And I think there's a real tension there because you can't just sit with them 24 hours a day.
Right.
And yet you don't want to just leave them to it and go about life either. Like that's the completely the wrong also end of the spectrum.
Right.
Yeah. And so I don't know where the balance is, but I know that you have to, it's one of those cases where you have to be aware of how you're doing. And if you need to kind of do something for yourself and maybe, like you said, or you're just sitting there not doing anything 23 hours a day while they're in pain or whatever it is. I would sometimes read or, do something else, but still be there with her. And so that was, like, okay, I'm there with her. I'm here if she needs me, but also like I have to kind of do something for myself too.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Something I want to go back to that is a sort of a new pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
Is the piece about we have to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our person.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely true.
Right.
But also that narrative really like irks me these days because it's like it implies that the only reason I need to take care of myself is so I can take care of Sean and not because like I'm a human who's like worthy of wellness, and I know that's not your intent. I just think that I just want to say that clearly because I think that too often we think the only reason we should take care of ourselves is so that we can continue to be a caregiver.
Yes.
And it's like, no, it's because you're a human being who deserves wellness and love and care, So I just had to go back.
No, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing I thought of as you were talking is that I didn't even think of until just now is that like I ordered takeout last night and ate that in front of Sean, which maybe was like terribly insensitive because he can't even swallow right now.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people whose people had head and neck cancer who like secretly ate, you know what I mean? Like So I'm sure he's probably okay with that, but I'll have to ask him about that later. But I mean, even that kind of thing, right? Like, do I get to eat this chicken sandwich or should I not? You know, if he can't swallow right now, should I watch that show or should I not? Should I go out with his dad or should I not? And so I think that's been an interesting thing for me to juggle this weekend is like, everybody is like, of course, Sean's not going to come hang out with us this weekend. But then I feel like, well, what's my expectation? You know, because technically I'm not sick.
Yeah.
But also I feel like I shouldn't leave aside. And also I kind of feel like garbage.
Yeah.
Because like I'm also going through it. You know, and so, but it's sort of like it's like I'm wondering if people are like, well, you're fine. Why aren't you coming? You know what I mean? Because like you didn't have a surgery. So I think there's that piece of the reminder of like, even though I was not operated on, like what is happening in my house and this witnessing of my husband feeling like so awful is impacting me and my current well-being.
Right.
You know, which I think people are starting to like, people generally, you know, are starting to, the more you and I talk about this and we talk about this, I think people are starting to get, but so it's probably just in my head, but I think just that piece of like, well, why do I need to go home and rest? Why do I need to take care of myself? Like I didn't have surgery, you know?
Yeah. And I can resonate with feeling that way, but also in these times, like we are doing so much more.
Oh yeah.
And these are intense times. I mean, it sounds like you're like really have a lot going on right now with taking care of Sean right now. And I imagine the emotional piece of that is also just enormous. So yeah, it makes sense that this is also a time where like, okay, how can I also not, I don't know, disappear into this caregiving role kind of like these are, but also it does ebb and flow. So that, I mean, there are times when you're just like, I am just solely in this. And so, yeah, I don't know. I keep thinking about there's the balance of this. And I think that's something we talk about a lot because you can't, it feels like you said, it feels wrong to be like, I'm going to leave them home.
Right.
And go do a thing.
Right.
And yet I imagine if you asked Sean about that, he would be like, yes, you should go.
Right. Right.
Is that?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wonder if there's something to which, I don't know. Do we feel like we need to do more than they really are asking of us when they're suffering?
Like, are they opening their eyes and are like, why isn't my person sitting right here? Or are we just imagining that that's how they feel if we're not?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And I know that there were times with Sarah where she definitely like, I need you here with me while this is happening. Like that was a real for sure thing. But also she understood too that I couldn't be there every moment of every day.
Yeah.
And that our lives needed to continue going forward. And there were things that I had to do that. And I needed to also continue interacting with people outside of our house. I needed to continue maintaining friendships. I needed to continue seeing family. Like I couldn't just be at home continuing to be more isolated.
Right.
Because that, I imagine we'll talk about support later in the episode here, but like if you are continuing to become more isolated, like you're losing out on, or it's not helping get the support that I think we need as much. And I think these are times too where like getting some outside support can be really helpful in not feeling like there's just, we need to be doing this, but we feel like we have to be with them and this isn't getting done, but also I have to cook dinner, but also, you know, do I need to sit with them so that if they need anything, I can quickly get it for them, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a heightened piece of this too is like in this moment, I also feel like I'm having to be a decision maker, right? About all the things that we talked about, but also about like, do I need to be advocating more? Should I be taking him in? Should I be calling again? Is this, or is, you know what I mean? Like, is this normal? Like all of those pieces. And so there's certainly seasons of more just like, okay, this is just what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are times like the one I'm in right now where it's also this like decision-making sort of stress of like, and especially because like, I mean, he's sick and he feels terrible. So he's not going to be the one. He very rarely is the one to be like, can you call someone?
Right.
You know? And so I feel like I need to be sort of like doing the research or managing the symptoms or just trying to decide like, okay, like, is this okay that it hasn't gotten better? Like, do I need to be, you know, and that's a whole exhausting layer of it too. And so it's not, there's the like witnessing the hard things piece, which is awful. But then there's also the sort of like symptom watching with part of the witnessing of like, okay, does he look worse than he looked before? Does he look better? Is he this? Is he, do you know what I mean? And so there's almost like the clinical witnessing that's going on as well in trying to decide, you know, again, it's not just like there's like, oh, he's got the flu and in 3 days it'll be better. It's like, okay, wait, are we doing enough? I'm the only one witnessing him right now.
Yeah.
And because of that, I'm the only one making decisions about like if this is okay or if he needs more, or if he needs something different. And that feels like really heavy.
Yeah.
To be the only one. Like I kind of want to like video call his doctor and be like, look at him, listen to him. Is this normal? You know? So I think that's another piece of this witnessing or of this like watching them suffer is that it's not just heartbreaking because it's our person, but it's also like a really important, terrible role that we have around it. Does that make sense?
It does. And I mean, you right now literally are Sean's voice. I mean, with him not being able to talk, like absolutely. If you are, I don't know, I imagine if you have an appointment, I don't know if you do, but like you would be the one doing a lot of the, this is what's happening. This is what he's going through. And I remember that like when Sarah was not well and we'd have an appointment, like that was one of my roles was to basically be her voice in those appointments because she would just be laying there on like the exam table, just not really able to do much. And so like, that's a lot of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure to convey everything that like they can't say that to kind of reinforce the magnitude of what's happening so that the doctors and, you know, medical staff understand that. That always felt like a lot of pressure for me to do that. And I think, I don't know, you brought up something too that made me think, we talk about it's important to be with them and like bear witness to this suffering so that they are not alone in it, so that like they can feel like someone else sees that this is happening. But we also, I mean, it depends on the situation to a certain extent, but like we don't want to just be doing that. Like you said, there are like, okay, just watching symptoms. Right. And okay, what can we be doing? What do we need to ask the medical staff to try to improve the situation? We don't want to go too far in either one. Right. But that I hadn't thought of that piece of there's a extremely higher mental load of trying to be super watchful and vigilant and not missing things and trying to discover things that might be important and lead to improvement. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right that we could tip one way or the other. Like we could be so sort of overwhelmed with like, my person, look at my person, he looks terrible. Right. That we miss sort of the like logistics of the like, oh, I didn't notice that his, I don't know, the face is swollen or whatever. Right. But we could go the other way of being so just like clinical that we forget the humanity of it. Right. And I think that I have found myself in those moments of like such a heightened sort of like nurse role, you know, that it's more like I go in and I check and I'm okay, how are the vitals and I write down the thing and then I'm like, okay, goodbye. And then I'm like, oh wait, I forgot to be like the wife, you know. I can remember like, especially when I had my other job and I had all these video calls like all the time. And I would like run in between the video calls and like, you know, how you doing? Yeah. And I remember like catching myself that like my
feet were like literally pointed towards the door. Like my face was pointed towards him, but like my feet were pointed like I was like halfway out. Do you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And I had to stop myself and be like, Allison, turn your feet. You know what I mean? Like be fully present here with him in this moment. And don't just be here as the nurse for a minute, but like also be here as a witness, as a wife, as a friend. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's such a hard piece that we can slip into. And I think a thing, and something I would love for us to talk about on a different episode at some point, is the concept of like compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
Because I think that can be legit. I mean, for, you know, like for those of us who, like for you, you said years she was in that state. And so, you know, the first couple of days, it's so hard. It's, you know, and after a while, I'm sure that there can be a piece for any of us of just like, really? Not really, but like less, like it, the poignantness of it, like wears down, can wear down.
Almost like you can start feeling numb to it.
Yeah,
to some extent, because it's just day in and day out. And that like, if you look at how you're feeling to it, like 2 years in versus the first month, like your emotional state is very different.
Right.
In that sense. Yeah.
And part of it is probably our really smart bodies.
Yeah.
Knowing like you can't sustain this level of like compassion and heartache and all of that for this long.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so it could be our bodies just being like, I'm just going to numb you up a little bit, you know, because you just can't stay on it for that long. But then also I think that, and that's why I want to talk about this another day, is I think then that can be hard too, because then like it's our person.
Right. We feel bad. Like it feels bad to say that, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't, but like that there was a numbing sensation over the years of it. Like that doesn't sound nice to say.
Right.
Like to hear that the compassion is fatiguing, like that doesn't feel right. Yeah. We should talk about that.
Yeah, we will. So I think that that's a huge thing too, is that like there's this sort of acute, like I'm in this really acute moment right now that I'm hoping will wane quickly.
I hope so too for you.
Yes. Thank you. But like if it's like 3 weeks from now and he's still, you know, coughing, can't swallow, I can imagine that I'll just be a little bit more like, how you doing? Good. Okay.
Right.
Which is terrible. Right.
Yeah.
But it's also like, I think I'm going to call that. It makes me feel better to call it like our bodies being really smart and trying to help us. I think another piece we haven't touched on yet, and actually Maya said something about this the other day, is that she said that she like hates all the doctors that have done things to him over the years. And so less of your situation, more of our situation, is that so many of the things that have happened to him are things we signed up for, things we paid for. You know what I mean? Like, so like he feels a billion times worse today than he did a week ago before this procedure that we begged them to do on him.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Like that feels messed up. Like it's not like he got hit by a car and now feels terrible and we can be mad at that car accident. It's like, oh no, we actually asked them to do this to him.
Yeah.
You know, or like all the Mohs procedures, same. It's like,
I'm thinking about his, like the eyelid thing he just had. Like that horribly traumatic. And yes, that was like, you signed up for that. Right.
So there's like, you like want to be mad at the person who did this, but also like you ask them to do it.
Right.
And you know, it's for the greater good. So then that kind of messes with your head.
Yeah.
That like, you know, and so many things like either like the procedure itself caused, like his bone marrow transplant, right? Like the bone marrow transplant like literally brings you to the point of death, as close to death as they can before they give you your new cells. So he was like waltzed into that hospital, like except for on paper where his numbers were bad, waltzed in being healthy as can be. And 2 weeks later was like close to death, right? Because of what they did to him. Because of what we asked them to do. Like that messes with your head, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Or all the things that like have happened to him as a result of treatments. So, you know, like he had to be on steroids for a long time after his transplant. Therefore, he has avascular necrosis in both of his hips. So he needed a hip replacement and the other one needs to be replaced, right? Like the medicine that was helping something else then caused pain, right? So I just feel like it's this I think when we talked about anger once, we talked about like, it's sometimes easier when there's like a thing you can like aim it at.
Mm-hmm.
And so often with a disease, like where are you aiming your anger? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so with these more acute moments like I'm in right now, it's like, am I mad at this doctor? Like, did he do something wrong? Like there's a little bit of that. Like, did he mess up?
Right.
Should I be like going down that path? But really it's just like, no, this is just the way that this had to happen. So my beloved husband is like in so much pain and can't swallow because of something we asked to have happen.
Right.
What?
Yeah. That's we haven't had that experience, but yeah, I see that in your life.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So that like really messes with your head.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because you can't be like, oh, that person that hit you with a car. So mad at them. It's like, oh, this doctor that we just paid billions of dollars to and begged to do this earlier. We wanted to like do this as soon as possible. Right.
Yeah.
So that is like, I don't know.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It's hard. It's hard.
It's really hard when our people are suffering.
It really is. Bottom line.
I think that has been one of the hardest things about this being a caregiver for those years when Sarah was not well is the amount of pain she was in, the helplessness around like, I can't take that away.
Yeah.
That I think hands down.
Yeah.
Hardest part of it.
Yeah. 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 I agree. Is that this is this person that we like, it's our person.
Yeah.
Right. It's our favorite person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And this thing is happening to them and they are miserable and we are the witness. We are in the front row seat for it.
Mm-hmm. And we feel the pressure of needing to dig them out of it.
Yeah. Like, is there something that we can do? So we're always wondering, is there more? Is there something else?
Yeah.
Should I be calling somebody? Is there more research? Is there this?
Yeah.
And that with the piece of helplessness when we realize like, nope.
Yeah.
This is reality.
Yeah.
Yep. How are we still standing? I mean, we're sitting, but you know what I mean? Like, do you ever think that? Like, how?
Yeah.
Like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there is something to our bodies doing something to protect us and keep us moving forward, whatever that is. Like, I know for me, I don't remember a lot of details from those years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't have the memories are very like general.
Sure.
And I don't know if that was somehow my body being like, we can't store every moment of this because that's going to be too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, to some extent, we just have to keep going.
Yeah.
We're not going to bail on the situation with our people.
Right.
And so the only way is forward, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's less of like, how do you do it? And more just like, wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. We've done a lot and we've been through a lot and we're pretty amazing that we're just like even sort of upright and moving, Yeah. Go us and go all of you listening who are just one foot in front of the other, my friends, witnessing your person, whether that's your spouse, your partner, your child. Oh, that's a special kind of terrible.
I can't imagine.
Your parents. That's a special kind of like all of it. Like it's all its own version of terrible. Mm-hmm. Right. And some of us are sandwich caregivers or whatever. And so then you have like multiple layers of watching people suffer. And it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So supporters.
Yeah.
What do we think about that? How can our friends and our family be with us and help us in this hard stuff?
Yeah. I think one is knowing, acknowledging, seeing, letting the caregiver know that, like, yes, I know that you are having to be there in that suffering and see that suffering, and just acknowledging that experience acknowledging the hardship of that. And I guess like we feel like we are there to bear witness to our person suffering, like as a supporter, be there to bear witness to the caregiver's suffering as
Love
well.
that. Yes. Yes.
And I think just knowing that people see what you're having to experience, I mean, that takes the edge off that loneliness.
Yeah.
Because you know that it's not just in isolation in this vacuum that no one sees.
Right.
I think that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think there's practical things too, like a lot of the things we normally talk about, like right now, for you, you've got a lot more you're doing from a caregiving perspective. So as a supporter, knowing those times when there's a lot more going on, step up and like ask if you can drop off a meal or, you know, whatever it is, but try to take things off their plate in those times for sure. I mean, in general, be doing that, but just be aware of these times where things are much more intense. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that piece about bearing the witness of how hard this is to be a caregiver, you know, and I'm noticing in sort of my followers and my community that people are starting to say, oh my goodness, thinking of Sean and you, you know, or like, this must be so hard for Sean and you. And I'm just like, yes. I mean, personally, that feels great, but also that people are just starting to recognize, like, don't just see that post about that Sean's in pain and talk about Sean, but thank you for also like recognizing the impact that that's having on me. Right. So I think that any of that, like including the like, and you caregiver, you know, I think about, you know, even like the way that my sister-in-law has handled this weekend of all these activities. And she's been like, tried to just like, you don't have to come to any of them, but we're going to try to make them like, if you want, we'll go to dinner that's really close to your house so that if you feel more comfortable, you can like sneak out and go to the dinner and come back, but no pressure. Or we can just drop this at your house if that feels good. If it doesn't, no big deal. You know what I mean? And so some of that kind of stuff I think can help. Yeah. I think just acknowledging, I wonder about people who are sort of more inner circle. Like, again, like I almost feel like I would feel better if like Sean's brother or my mom or somebody like inner circle was also witnessing this. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, because then again, it's not just sort of me being the only one to hold it. And the only one to make decisions about, do we call someone or whatever, but also like to have that be shared, right, with somebody else, I think would, you know, but again, so then I have to think about like, how would he feel about that? And I don't want it to be like a, you know, like the petting zoo kind of like, let's come look at Sean, right? But it just does feel really heavy to be the only one right now witnessing it. So to think about if there's someone in the inner circle that could also be there and sit with them. Or like you said, if someone wants to be sat with, right? Is there anyone else in your circles that you feel like you and they would feel comfortable if it's them, you know, being there as well? Yeah, I think that having the right person there is important. But I think having someone else who could be there, one, to expand the number of people that are aware of the suffering, I think can be meaningful, but also to ease that guilt that we have of I'm not there with them. Right. And instead I'm doing the things that either that are for me or, you know, just we got to keep the house moving. Right. But to know that there's someone else there, I think that would be huge. To have that. Yeah. I think even like a respite kind of thing of someone saying like, do you want me to just come sit in your living room so I'm close by? Yeah. So that you can go take a walk, so that you can take a nap, so that you can whatever you need to do, you know? Yeah. That kind of thing. Yeah. It strikes me a little bit. This is a little bit of a side note, but you keep talking about like keeping the house moving, and it's like, darn houses. I mean, same. Right. Like today I'm like, oh, the dishwasher needs to be unloaded and the garbage and the laundry. And I'm just like, don't those appliances know that I'm having a hard time over here? Right. Can't they there's so much of the like themselves? The nuts and bolts of life doesn't slow down.
when things get intense and hard.
Unfortunately, we keep eating and wearing clothes and using garbage. And it's like,
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Thank you, friend, for talking through this today.
Yeah.
And, I was telling you before we hit record that, if we had like a dog training podcast, I would not have been up for talking today. But the fact that actually our conversation is, right about exactly what I'm experiencing right now actually helps. So
good.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me show up with the energy level that I am today. And for
no worries,
bearing witness to what I'm going through right now. So I'm grateful for you and for this space. Caregivers listening, I just have a sense that I can already feel the people nodding their heads and saying yes as they listen to this episode. I think this is going to hit home for a lot of people. So keep your eyes open for when the next support group on this topic will be. And if you are not on the email list for the support groups yet and want to be, so that you can be alerted, just reach out to me at Allison at thenegativespace.life and I will add you to that, or else just watch social media and we'll let you know when the support group is going to be. But I think this will be a good conversation to have with other folks as well. So yeah.
Good.
All right. I hope that the next time we talk, it's just better.
I very much hope that for you.
So much better. That's my hope. So here's to that. All right. Talk to you later, friend.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to In Sickness. Find us online at insickness.care or on Instagram at insicknesspodcast. You can send your questions and comments to insicknesspodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or fellow caregiver, or leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening, and take care.